It is always good to be with people of a thankful heart. As a sweet psalmist of Israel, some of my fondest memories are of times when God's people gathered together in great celebrations of worship and praise and of giving thanks unto God. I can remember one time in particular, God's people had gathered together from all over the 12 tribes. The streets were flooded with people who were anxiously waiting to enter the gates of the house of the Lord and worship him. And as they were waiting, they looked to me and they said, "King David, teach us a new song to sing. Teach us to be thankful unto God." And so on that special occasion, I taught them this song to sing for the very first time. "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting and his truth endures into all generations." Yes, it is good to be with people of thankful heart. God raised me up from a shepherd boy to be the king of all the land. And from shepherd boy to king, God taught me many reasons why I need to be thankful to him. And as I share some of those with you just now, I hope and pray that they will be an encouragement to you, that you will be more thankful to him. Why am I thankful to God? I'm thankful, first of all, because he's the creator of the beauty of the heavens and the earth. Now, as a boy, my job as the youngest child was to take care of my father's sheep. And I took good care of them. And it was a all-day, all-night affair. I had little time to even rest, on my feet most of the time, taking care of the sheep, defending them, making sure they were fed and watered. And one day, I had a busy day with them, and finally at night, I got them settled down for the evening, and for the first time I was able to sit down on the grassy hillside and rest. And as I did, I looked up into the sky, and I just couldn't believe what I saw at that moment. And I can't describe to you how I felt, because the sky was so full of stars, and the moon was so bright and full, it was almost as if you could reach out and touch it. And at that moment, I was so overwhelmed with a sense of God's glory that I just couldn't hold myself back. And I sang to the Lord, saying to him, "O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You've set your glory above the heavens. When I consider the heavens, the moon and the stars that you have put in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth." And as I sang that song to him, two things came to mind. It occurred to me, first of all, that only a fool could say in his heart there is no God. For the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky shows his handiwork. And then it occurred to me that if the heavens are so bright and brilliant and beautiful, then how much more bright and brilliant and glorious and beautiful must the creator of all these things be? Yes, I'm thankful. I'm thankful because he's the creator of the beauty of the heavens and the earth. Why am I thankful to God? I'm thankful also because he's the rock of my salvation. When God delivered me from the hand of King Saul and from the hand of all my enemies, I sang to him the words of this victory song. "I love you, O Lord, my strength. My God is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. He is the shield, the horn of my salvation, and my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy of praise, and he delivers me from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me. The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. And in my distress I called upon the Lord, and he reached down from on high and drew me out of deepest waters and set me high upon a rock. The Lord lives, and blessed be the rock, and may the God of my salvation be exalted." No wonder God's people could sing with me the words of another song that I wrote. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When my enemies advance against me to devour my flesh, they stumble and fall. Though an army attack me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, in this I'll be confident. One thing I ask of the Lord, this one thing I seek, that I might dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life and gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. For in the time of trouble he will keep me. He will hide me in the shelter of his tabernacle. He will set me high upon a rock. Yes, I'm grateful that the God of creation is also the rock of my salvation. And I know that you have much for which to be thankful for in that same way, because he has sent his Son, the Messiah, whom I often spoke of in the Psalms, hundreds of years before his birth. I spoke of his death and his resurrection and his ascension on high. He has sent him to be the rock of your salvation. So rejoice and give thanks unto him. Why am I thankful to God? I'm thankful that he gives me strength when I'm weak. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, you're King David, what do you know about being weak? But you see, you forget that I was the youngest and the scrawniest of 8 brothers, the sons of Jesse. And I well remember that day in which the great prophet Samuel came to visit my father there at his house in Bethlehem. And Samuel was greeted by my father, but my father didn't know why the great prophet would come to see him. And Samuel said, Jesse, God has told me that he's chosen one of your sons to be the next king of Israel. And so I want you to have your son stand before me, and God will point out which one he has chosen. And so all of my brothers stood before the great prophet Samuel. Not me. I was out taking care of my father's sheep because I was the youngest. They didn't even think about calling me in because they thought surely one of my older, stronger brothers would be the one God would want to be king. But as Samuel went down the line, he looked at one brother and he said, no. The next one, no. And went on down the line until he came to the end of the line. And then with a puzzled look on his face, he said to my father, Jesse, do you not have any other sons? And Jesse said, well, I do have one more son, but he's the youngest. He's out taking care of the sheep. Well, call him in and have him stand before me and see what God says. And only then was I brought in to stand before the prophet. And when Samuel looked at me, he said, yes, this is whom God has chosen. Because God does not look upon men like men do. God looks upon the heart. And so it would be a short time after this that God would prove to be in a most dramatic way how he gives strength to the weak. For the Philistines had drawn up battle lines in the valley of Aphek, the valley of blood. And the men of Israel went out to engage them in battle. But when they arrived at this place where the battle lines had been drawn, they stopped dead in their tracks because they found that the Philistines had a secret weapon, a great big powerful giant of a man by the name of Goliath. He stood 9 feet 2 inches tall. He had a helmet and body armor of bronze that weighed 125 pounds, and that didn't even include his leg armor. He had a sword by his side. He had a spear in his hand and a javelin slung around his neck. And he stood, and with a growl, he shook his fist in the faces of the men of Israel, and he said, choose your champion today. Have him come out and fight me one-on-one, winner take all. But none of the men of Israel dared take him up on that challenge. Not King Saul, who himself was the tallest man in all Israel. And not even my brothers who were in the army and older than I. And so day after day, the challenge continued to be issued by the great champion of the Philistines. And day after day, no one responded. And then the day came when my father called me in from the field, And I think he was a little worried that maybe some disaster had happened, maybe a massacre had occurred, because no word was coming back from the battlefield. But obviously nobody wanted anybody back home to know how cowardly they all were. And so my father said, David, here, take this food and give it to your brothers and see how the battle's going. And so I took the food. And I came to the place where the battle was supposed to be happening, and I couldn't believe my eyes. There's this oversized bag of wind standing there, shaking his fist in the faces of the army of the living God, and no one had the backbone to stand up to him. And so I went to my brothers and I said, why don't one of you go take him on? And they all turned their noses up in a sneer. And they said, what's a runt like you got to do with anything like this? You're good for nothing except to take care of our father's sheep. So why don't you go home and do that and leave real fighting to real men? Well, I knew my brothers well enough to know they weren't going to do anything. And so I went directly to King Saul. And I said, I want to fight that man. And he looked at me and he said, you can't fight him. You're nothing but a boy. He's been a fighting man from his youth up. But I said, the God who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the mouth of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And when he saw that he couldn't talk me out of this, he said, well, at least take my body armor. I said, no, I'll just take my shepherd's pouch and sling, and off I went, pausing only long enough to pick up some smooth stones in the brook nearby. And when I approached the place where the battle line had been drawn, Goliath came out for his daily challenge. And when I stepped forward, oh, you could just see the anger welling up inside of him. He was irate. He said to the men of Israel who were cowering in the shadows, he said, am I a dog that you should send a boy out to fight me with sticks? And he looked at me and he said, I'm going to feed your flesh to the beasts and the birds, boy. And I looked up at him and I said, you come out to fight me with a sword, a javelin, and a spear. But I come out to fight you in the name of the God whose army you have defied. And he moved against me for the attack. But I just calmly loaded one of the stones into my shepherd's sling, and I started to wind it around my head, faster and faster and tighter, and I let it rip. And I found its mark. And the great champion of the Philistines fell to the ground in a thunderous crash. But I want you to know, it was not I who won the battle that day. It was God who gives strength to the weak. And so I want to ask you, what giant are you fighting right now? What giant are you up against that you think is just too hard for you to win against? Maybe some giant of temptation. Maybe some giant of grief and sorrow. Maybe some great loss in your life. And you feel like you can't make it. You can't do this. You have no strength to do it. You can't make it. But whenever you feel that way, I want you to remember God. I want you to remember that when you're weak, He's strong. And I want you to remember that God specializes in giving strength to the weak. Why am I thankful to God? I'm thankful because He gives me encouragement in times of deep distress and grief. When I won that battle against Goliath, the people of Israel had this silly song that they began to sing. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has tens of thousands. And Saul couldn't stand it. He was a very prideful man, and he couldn't stand having somebody else getting more glory than he. And so one day while I was playing music for him there in the palace, he took his spear and tried to nail me to the wall. But I escaped out the window. And from that time on, I was a hunted animal. And there were days in which Saul's army that was sent out to track me down on one side of the mountain path, and I was on the other, and if I would have stumbled and fallen, they would have caught me and killed me. There were some friends of mine who came out to support me, but it was not safe for us to leave our families there in the city, and so we had to bring our families with us. And let me tell you, it was a miserable existence. It's no fun to raise your family in caves and in rocks and holes in the ground where we had to live, because Saul wanted us dead. Well, it was terrible, but one day something wonderful happened. There was a king who gave me a gift. He gave me the gift of a city. How would you like to have a king give you the gift of a city? He gave me the city of Ziklag. Now, I know that Ziklag doesn't sound like much of a city to you, but to us, it became home. It became a place where we could raise our family in peace and have some quietness and have some order in our daily routines. And so things began to look up for us all. And so much so that one day my men and I went out on a scouting expedition and left our families there in Ziklag where we thought they would be safe. But when we returned, we found that the very worst thing that could possibly have happened happened. A group of Amalekite raiders came through the area and burned Ziklag to the ground. And they took our wives and our children, and off they went, who knows where. And when my men and I came back, I'm not ashamed to tell you that even though we were battle-hardened warriors, we lifted up our eyes and we wept, and we wept, and we wept until there were just no more tears to cry. And my men even started to blame me. Where's this God of yours? Why has he let this happen? We thought he had chosen you to be king. Where is he? Why has he let you down? Why has he let us down? And they even talked about stoning me. And I never felt so alone in my life. But it's then that I did the one thing you have to do when you feel that way. You know what it is? I encouraged myself in the Lord. I encouraged myself in the Lord. I didn't have anybody else to encourage me. They all seemingly had turned against me. But I realized that I still had God in my life. And even if the worst thing were to happen and we would never get our families back again, I still had God. And God would take care of me. Well, God did take care of us. Because shortly afterward, we found someone sick and dying at the side of the road. It was an Amalekite slave that had been thrown away by the fast-moving band of raiders as they were trying to get out of the area before we returned. And so because he was sick and they thought he'll be dead soon anyway, we can't be slowed down by him. They just threw him away like a piece of trash. But we found him alive. And we nursed him back to health. And he told us where the Amalekite camp could be found. And we snuck up on that camp. And we caught him by surprise. And we won a great victory. And we found our wives and children unharmed. Now let me tell you, you know as well as I do, not everything in life has a happy ending like that. There are times that we face loss of loved ones that we never get back. And we face grief and sorrow beyond measure. And we feel alone. And sometimes we may even feel abandoned by God. But don't feel that way. Remember what I did whenever you're tempted to feel that way. Remember, encourage yourself in the Lord. Be encouraged that you still have God in your life no matter what happens. Why am I thankful to God? I'm thankful because he forgives me of my sins. King Saul died in the Battle of Mount Gilboa, and I became the king of Israel. And I served God for many years. But there was one spring that I sent my army out on a military campaign, but I stayed behind instead of going with them. And after my evening meal one night, I went out on my balcony and I looked out over the city of Jerusalem. And I saw something I wish I'd never seen. And if I had to do it over again, I would have turned around and walked back into my room. For you see, I saw a woman. She was bathing. And I became obsessed with this woman. And I asked her to be brought to me. And I'm ashamed to say this, but I have to say it. I committed adultery with her. And she became pregnant. And to try to hide what had happened, I had her husband placed on the front line of battle so that he would be killed. And then I took her as my wife. And I tried to justify this. I've tried to convince myself that it wasn't all that bad. I tried to sweep it under the rug. But all along, it was eating me up inside. And this went on for months. And that guilt was still there, and I was still not doing anything about it. And then one day, I was visited by a good friend of mine, the prophet Nathan. And I was always glad to see Nathan. He had good stories to tell, and he always kept me up on things that were going on that I needed to know about. And I welcomed him, and I said, Nathan, what do you have to tell me? What's going on in my kingdom that I need to know about? And he said, Your Majesty, there is something you need to know about. For there are two men, and they're neighbors. And one is very rich and has many herds of cattle and many flocks of sheep. But his neighbor is a very poor man who has nothing at all except a little ewe lamb, and even that is like a pet for his children that eats and sleeps with his children. And one day, the rich man had guests. And he wanted to serve a good meal to his guests. But instead of taking one from his flock or one from his herd, he went and he took the poor man's little ewe lamb and he butchered it. And he served that to his guests. And I know that anybody who saw me, who was looking at me that day when Nathan said those words, saw my face turn bright red with anger. I had never been so angry in all my life. And I just burst out and I said, Nathan, As surely as the Lord lives, the man who has done this thing is worthy of death. And Nathan, good friend that he was, raised his hand and pointed it directly at me. And he said, King David, you are that man. You took another man's wife, and you sentenced yourself. And at that moment, all the guilt from all these many months of trying to pretend like it wasn't all that big of a deal just burst upon me, and I couldn't stand it any longer. And I ran to my room, and I threw myself down on the floor. And I said, have mercy on me, O God. According to your loving kindness, according to your tender mercy, blot out my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse me from my sin. For my sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight. Wash me and I will be whiter than snow. Cleanse me and I will be clean. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Restore a steadfast spirit within me. Restore to me the joy of my salvation, for the sacrifice that you desire is the sacrifice of a broken heart, a broken spirit, and a broken and contrite heart. And that's what I gave God that day, a broken and contrite heart. And I want you to look inside yourself right now. What's going on in your life? What is there that you've tried to justify, that you tried to make excuse for, but you know that it's not God's will that you're doing that? And you're maybe trying to just ignore it and hope that you will stop feeling guilty about it. And that's not the way it works. You need to do what I did. You need to bring before God a broken and contrite heart. And when you do, God will do for you what he did for me. He'll forgive you of your sin. He forgave me. Oh, it's not because I deserve to be forgiven. It's not because I'm somebody special that I'm King David. No, that's not it at all. He forgave me because he's a God of tender mercy and loving kindness. Why am I thankful to God? One last thing comes to mind. I'm thankful because he's the shepherd of my soul. Now, I served God for 40 years as king. And I took care of much government business there in the palace. I entertained foreign dignitaries. I signed documents. I heard discussions on the various things going on in the kingdom. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I never got over being a shepherd boy. And even in the midst of all those delicate negotiations and all the entertainment of dignitaries, I would often daydream. Daydream back to the time that I was a shepherd boy, taking care of my father's sheep. And I want you to know, I was a good shepherd. I really was. If my sheep needed food, I'd take them to the greenest pasture possible. If they needed water, I'd take them to still water, because sheep won't drink from flowing waters of a river. Had to be still. And if there was a little lamb that was particularly hungry and couldn't keep up with the flock as we were going to pasture, I carried with me a leather pouch called a shakon, a table. And I would spread that table out on the ground with extra food for the sheep and let that little lamb feed. And if there was a lamb that needed an extra drink of water, I'd let it drink out of my own cup. And if there was a sheep that got tangled up in the brambles and briars and thorns and cut itself, I carried with me a flask of oil. And I would take that sheep in my arms and I would put the oil on its head and soothe its pain. And as I was thinking about all these things, suddenly the most wonderful thought came to mind. Oh, I know I'd thought about it before, but not like I did at that moment. It occurred to me, I'm a sheep, and I have a shepherd. And I went back to my room and I wrote down the words of a song that I taught my people to sing. And maybe you've heard it before. It goes like this. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And yes, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You have a shepherd who wants to take good care of you if you'll but turn your life over to him. These are some of the many things that God has done for me, of why I'm thankful to him. He's the creator of the beauty of the heavens and the earth. He's the rock of my salvation. He gives me strength when I'm weak. He gives me encouragement in times of deep distress and grief. He forgives me of my sin. And he's the shepherd of my soul. I must leave you now. But as I do, I leave you with the words that I taught my people to sing on that special day long ago. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful to him and bless his name, for the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures into all generations. May the goodness and mercy and truth of Almighty God rest upon your souls, both now and forevermore. Amen.